Before we begin, I would like to say that this is not legal advice. I'm not an attorney. If you need legal advice about contracts, or whether you need a contract as a dispatcher or a broker or a carrier and what kind of contract, please consult an attorney, state, local, or federal agencies. Now let's begin. Hi, this is Enis from Never Stop Trucking. Today we're talking about contracts. I feel like this topic deserves a video for itself, and I'm going to be talking whether you need a contract as a dispatcher between you and a carrier, and what kind of contract and what should it be called. Now, according to FMCSA, dispatcher is someone who is not doing things that a broker would normally do, such as arranging freight directly with shippers, getting paid by shippers directly, or getting the carrier paid as well, because that's what brokers do. Those are just a part of a few things that FMCSA requires you as a dispatcher not to do. And I spoke about that in a couple of other videos, but in this video I will be talking about contracts. Now here in this part, FMCSA set out a list of factors in favor of a dispatch service not needed to obtain broker authority. So the first one that they show here is the dispatch service has a written legal contractual relationship with a motor carrier that clearly reflects the motor carrier is appointing the dispatch service as a licensed agent for the motor carrier. And then they proceed to say that this is often a long-term contractual relationship. Okay, now this is one of 9 other things, and here at the end they say that while no single factor is paramount in assessing the business relationship between a dispatcher service and a motor carrier, the extent of a motor carrier's control over the individuals performing the dispatch services is highly significant. So they don't say that you have to have any of these 9 things in place per se, that you must have, but these are the steps that determine the role of a dispatcher that they play with a carrier. So if, for example, if you check all of these, then you are a dispatcher. If you check most of them, then you're most likely a dispatcher again. But if only a few of these 9 things apply to you, then you might be considered a broker. All right, so this is only the first part, and it mentions a contract. Now it says here that they have a written legal contractual relationship. It doesn't say you have to have a contract. You have a written, okay, contractual relationship. A lot of these definitions from FMCSA about dispatchers are vague. All right, so you have to they're open to interpretation. So they do not say that you have to have a contract, and we'll talk about contracts in a few minutes again. All right, so one of the things that they recommend is that you have a contractual relationship, and it says this is often a long-term. Now it says this is often. It doesn't say it must be long-term contractual relationship. And what do they even mean by a long-term? We'll talk about that as well. And then here there is another 6 factors that weigh in of favor of dispatch service requiring broker authority. So the number 3 here is the dispatch service arranges for a shipment of freight for a motor carrier with which there is no written legal contract with the motor carrier that meets the aforementioned criteria. If you don't have a legal contract, then you could be considered a broker. So that also does not make sense, because they don't say what kind of contract, because there are many contracts. There are at least 3 that I'm going to be talking about, and it doesn't really specify what kind of contract. All right, so when we speak about contracts, what most people think is a contract between carrier and an owner operator, all right, because that's a real contract, all right, and that contract says that motor carrier works with an owner operator when that owner operator is leased onto them exclusively, all right. For example, let's say I have a carrier authority, I have my own MC number, and there is an owner operator who wants to come and work in my company. So then they get leased onto us. What we do is we give them our signs, they put them on their trucks, we put them on our insurance, brokers pay us directly, and then we will pay the carrier minus the fee. So in that contract, an owner operator will work exclusively under my authority. That owner operator is not allowed to be dispatched by someone else or to take freight from another authority because they have my signs on their trucks and they're on my insurance. If something happens, then they will come after my insurance. So that's a big no-no. Now that is a real contract, and that's a long-term contract, and it's an exclusive contract. Then we have another contract, and that's between broker and a carrier. Now here, in these instances that FMCSA mentions, they say that a broker cannot have a contract with a carrier. Now they don't really specify like what kind of contract, because brokers will not work with you as a carrier unless you sign a contract with them. Now it's not an exclusive contract, it's a different one. That one will say that the carrier has their own insurance, that they will obey all the laws and all the rules, hours of service, etc., and that they will not, for example, try to get the customers from the broker that they worked with that broker and other things, all right? So you have to fill out that, and it's the part of the carrier packet. And then another contract is the rate confirmation. When carrier books a load with a broker, then you get a rate confirmation, and that's also a kind of a contract. It will say that the carrier has to pick up the load on time and send the bill of lading when they're finished, obey all the laws, and the broker has to pay the carrier for those services. So that's another contract. Now we come to a dispatcher carrier contract that I like to call agreement. Why? Now, if we say contract, that kind of will send a message that we are binding that carrier to work only with us, and that's really not possible. Carriers are allowed to work with multiple dispatching companies at the same time. Nothing prevents them from doing that. They can also book loads on their own behalf. Why? Because they get paid directly from the broker, because they have their own authority. This contract or an agreement will say that a dispatcher is allowed to book freight on behalf of that carrier, that the carrier has to have all the insurances in place, all the permits, that they have to be legal. That agreement includes a power of attorney that a carrier will sign and allow the dispatcher to book freight in their own name, to sign the contracts with the broker, etc. So that's is an agreement, and you can find it on our website on neverstoptruck.in, and you can download a template and you can adjust it to your own needs. So like we said, there are few contracts there, and FMCSA does not really specify what kind of contract you should have, and it's always a good practice to have a contract in place when you are a dispatcher working with a carrier, due to many reasons. One of them is getting paid on time, having some kind of a binding agreement with the two of you. Now, the other day I was explaining some ways of advertising services to carriers from dispatchers, and sometimes these dispatching companies will say that there are no contracts as a way to attract a carrier to them, all right? And it's open to interpretation if they're legally allowed to do that or say that, but what they mean with that part of their advertisement when they say no contracts, they most likely mean that there is no exclusive contract that will bind the carrier to work only with that dispatcher, and that they can stop using their services at any time. So basically, that's what they mean. It's not that they mean, okay, well, you're not supposed to sign anything. We don't have to have an agreement, because, of course, you have to have an agreement that you're going to get paid, and that will specify the role of you as a dispatcher and the role of the carrier. All right. So that's what they mean. Now, if you ask me, do you need a contract as a dispatcher with a carrier? I'm still going to say no, not per se, not an exclusive contract, not a contract in a way that a carrier gets with an owner operator. But you still have to have a written piece of paper or DocuSign or digital copy or something like that that will say that you are a dispatcher, that you're merely looking for loads for this carrier, the carrier's obligation that they have to have their insurance, that they will pay you on time, and that you don't take any payments from the broker or from the shipper, that you find available freight and book that freight on behalf of the carrier with the broker. The broker will pay the carrier, and you have to collect your dispatching fees from the carrier whenever that load is finished. The carrier does not have to stay with you for a set period of time. The carrier is not obliged to work with you exclusively. So a good agreement will include all of these or some of these depending on your needs. Remember, this is not a legal advice. Consult a lawyer, consult state and federal agencies if you need help with these. My name is Enis. This is Never Stop Trucking, and I'll see you guys around. Come back, subscribe to the channel.